Welcome to chapter 9 of the book of Genesis. But as you can see, I have chapter 8:21. After I finished the last video, I started thinking about the part where it has in verse 21, it says, right here, as you can see, and the Lord smelled the scent of pleasant aroma. And the Lord God said, in considering I will not add yet to curse the earth on account of the works of men, for the thought of man clings upon the wicked things from his youth. Man now is nowhere near what Adam was before the fall, unfortunately. Before the fall, man didn't know the difference between good and evil. It almost sounds robotic, doesn't it? Imagine if you didn't know, you're just existing. You didn't know good from evil. You had no decisions to make whether you should do the right thing or the wrong thing, because there was no right and no wrong. And the knowing of good and evil is mentioned in Genesis 2:9 and verse 17, in chapter 3, verses 5 and 22. It talks about the good and evil. The good and evil existed before the fall. And it was mentioned by God that if they ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowing of good and evil, they will be like us. And then that was confirmed by Satan, who said to Eve that you will be like the gods. And so the good and evil existed before the fall. But then in chapter 3, the fall of man existed, where Eve ate of the fruit, and then the serpent and man and so forth. Now, to me, it was like thinking about, now, what are the indications of the fall? How did things differ? The first thing was being ashamed. It says in Genesis 2:25, and the two were naked, and both Adam and his wife, and were not ashamed. But after the fall, they were ashamed, and being naked is not something we do. We feel shame. Now, you may be a nudist and go to a nudist beach and overcome that shame, but you're certainly not going to walk down the street and do something like that, because it's not accepted. And if somebody took your clothes off in the midst of a group of people, you wouldn't want that to happen. You'd feel ashamed, try to cover up. Now, why is that? Well, that is because of the fall of man with Adam and Eve eating of the fruit that they're not supposed to. Another indication is hiding from God. It says in Genesis 3:8, and both Adam and his wife hid from the face of the Lord God in the midst of the tree of the paradise. Now, they knew God personally. We don't know him in the way that they did. They actually saw some sort of a, whatever it was, whatever God, however he appeared to them. But we are ashamed. We do things that we don't want God to know. And what do? We just sort of put it in our mind that God's not there. He's not watching. So psychological way of dealing with hiding from God. And then in verse 3:10 of Genesis, it says, I heard your sound while walking in the paradise. That was Adam saying that. And I feared, for I am naked. So he had a fear now of what God could do. And we also fear what God can do to us. He can send us to Hades, or he can deliver us through Jesus, go to be with him in heaven. He's somebody to fear. Apparently, they didn't have any fear. They just were existing, almost robotic. And then they had distress. In Genesis 3:16, it says, and to the woman he said, in multiplying, I will multiply your distresses and your moaning. So distress is and moanings, basically with childbirth, but that those things now came into existence. Apparently she might have had children before, but in a different state. As I mentioned, it's a possibility, I suppose, but in the image of God, the man was made in the image of God, and it mentions that in many places, but in the image of God before man fell. And then another indication is the land is cursed. In Genesis 3:17, it says, "Accursed is the land among your works." Then murder came into existence in Genesis 4:8. Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. And then finally, God pondered in Genesis 6:6, and God pondered that he made the man upon the earth, and he considered it. It's really sad that the fallen man, the state that we are in, would make God think twice about what he did. Are we a mistake? Well, he's given us a second chance, hasn't he, with Jesus Christ, and we can be with him in the state that we were with, where Adam was at, and being in the eating of the true of life in the New Jerusalem in verse 21 or 22 of Revelation. So in the paradise, so we will be there if we walk to the end, remain with Christ until the end. Meno is the end, remain to the end. Now, chapter 9, we'll go into that, and I'll read some of that chapter in the Greek, and then we'll go through the book. Ke evlogison o Theos ton Noah, ke tus ius avtu, ke ipen avtis, avxanis the, ke plethinus the, ke pliorosate tigin, ke katakirievsate avtis. And God blessed Noah. So that's a wonderful thing, to be blessed by God, rather than cursed. More or less the opposite of Cain killing Abel. He is cursed, but not Noah and his sons. And he said to them, "Grow and multiply and fill the earth and dominate it." Of course, this is after the coming out of the boat, ark. "And the fear of you and the trembling will be upon all the wild beasts of the earth." Now that's interesting. The fear of you will be upon all the wild beasts of the earth. So I was thinking about that. Well, it kind of leaves out the Tyrannosaurus, doesn't it, that we see in all these movies of people going into a world of on some island that the animals were still like at the beginning with dinosaurs and Jurassic Park and all these things. But all the animals were trembling at man. Man was way worse than any dinosaur. Of course, the Tyrannosaurus and the dinosaurs, they could be by an extinct, dying in the flood, and they could have been vegetarians also. Just because they had big teeth doesn't necessarily mean they're meat eaters. And then it continues, and upon all the winged creatures of the heaven, and upon all the things moving upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea under man's domination. Under your hands I have given them to you. And every reptile which is living shall be to you for food. Now that's interesting, because the law of Moses does not allow eating reptiles. So we now have the second law, the Noahic law. The first law that actually this would be the first law, the Noahic law. Next, I believe, would be the law of Job, what he was able to do before the Jews. And it got me to thinking about it. Well, why do the Christian churches and people writing books and pastors and everybody, not they don't all do this, but the ones that do, they push people into going back to the Jewish law, Mosaic law that was there in the book of Genesis. But the Jews couldn't follow it, and then they end up crucifying their God, Christ, cursed for 2,000 years. Why in the world would anybody go to the Mosaic law? I just don't understand. If you want to go to a law back somehow you feel like, well, I want to do that, why not go back to Noah's law and eat reptiles? And I have given to you, he says, vegetation of grass, except eat not meat with the blood of life. And this was also in the Mosaic law, but the reptiles weren't. In verse, except, 5, for even your blood, of the blood of your lives, from the hand of all the wild beasts I shall require it, and from the hand of a man's brother I shall require it, eating the blood, and the one shedding blood of a man, in return his blood shall be shed. So basically, murder was against the law of Noahic law, and if a person murdered, then they should be put to death. For in the image of God I made the man. So here is the image. Now, I believe that was in the image of God before the fall. Verse 7, but you grow and multiply and fill the earth, and multiply upon the earth. And God said to Noah and to his sons, saying, behold, I raise up my covenant to you and to your seed after you, and every living soul after you, from fowls, and that's birds, and from cattle, and to all the wild beasts of the earth, as many as are with you, from all the ones coming forth from out of the ark. And I will establish my covenant with you, and all flesh will not die any longer from the water of the flood. And there shall not be any longer a flood of water. The second way the earth is going to be destroyed is by fire. But it doesn't say that here. But so there shall not be any longer a flood of water to lay waste all the earth. I live in Newport, and we have a lot of water here, but nothing like that flood. And God said to Noah, this is a sign of the covenant, Simeon, a semaphore, a sign of the covenant, which I execute between me and you, and between every living soul, as much as is with you for eternal generations. So really, we could be sons of Abraham, sons of Noah, and I suppose, we're not supposed, it says in the New Testament, and in the Mosaic Jews, the true Jews. Then what is it? I put my bow, taxon, in the cloud, and it will be for a sign of covenant between me and the earth. And it will be in my collecting together clouds upon the earth. So apparently it didn't have rain earlier. The bow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant. And now the cloud comes from light hitting and reflecting off of different. I'm not a scientist. I don't know exactly how it is, but water molecules in it. But it says that God is light. So the light God caused the rainbow, and it says in 1 John 1:5, God is light, and darkness is not in any way with him. So there will not be any longer the water for a flood, so as to wipe away all flesh. And my bow will be in the cloud, and I will see it to remember the eternal covenant between me and the earth, and between the living soul, which is in all flesh upon the earth. I just watched a video on Venus. They landed on Venus in the 80s. The Russians, Soviet Union then took pictures, just unbelievable, just flat rocks for as long as you could see. And God said, and so earth is way different. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant of which I ordained between me and between all flesh which is upon the earth. So the rainbow. Now verse 18, it changes and it says, and these were the sons of Noah coming forth from out of the ark. Sem, Ham, Japheth, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, I would assume Shem was the oldest, then Ham, and then Japheth. I'm not sure if it. I haven't looked at all their ages and everything, but I believe that's how it works. And then it says, and Ham was father of Canaan. Now it's very important because of this person called Canaan, the son of Ham. These three are the sons of Noah, that is, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. From these, men were disseminated upon all the earth, and their wives. And the man Noah began to be a Georgos, George. That's what that derivative is, the name George, a farmer of the land. And he planted a vineyard. And he drank from the wine and became intoxicated, drunk. And he became naked in his house. And Ham, the father of Canaan, looked at the nakedness of his father. So he sees him running around naked and drunk. And going forth, he announced to his two brothers outside, Shem and Japheth, hey, they're naked, running around. Let's do something about it. And taking Shem and Japheth, the cloak, they placed it upon their two backs and went backwards into the house and covered up the nakedness of their father. I guess the shame, and they didn't want to see their father naked for whatever reason. And their face was backwards, and they looked not at the nakedness of their father. Now Ham did. We saw him. And it says, and Noah sobered up from the wine. And he knew as much as, here it is, his younger son did to him. Well, the younger son was not Ham. The younger son was Japheth, but it wasn't Japheth, because it says here in the next verse, and he said, accursed be Canaan. So that was the younger one. It says his son, but it uses a son even for grandsons in the Bible, in the Greek. And he said, accursed be Canaan, a child. He will be a domestic servant to his brothers. Now, and so he knew as much as his younger son did. It doesn't tell us what he actually did. It leaves us up to our imagination, and I'm not going to go into that because I don't know. And whatever it was, Canaan became accursed by his grandfather. And he will be a domestic servant to his brothers. And he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan will be his domestic servant. And Canaan became the land that the children of Israel from leaving Egypt went into over the Jordan River into the land of Canaan and conquered it. So they became the domestic servant to Israel. And then he continues, may God widen to Japheth, that's the younger one, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem. And Shem is where the lineage of Jesus goes through and the kings. And let Canaan become their servant, so Shem too. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. And all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Verse chapter 10, we go into the generations of Noah. And remember, if your name is in there, you want to hear it, so I better come and listen to these names. The generations of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Hope you join us in the next video seminar. Until then, God bless.